Good morning, everyone. I see everyone starting to trickle in, so we'll go ahead and get started with some introductions. Good morning to you, Lori. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you doing this morning?
Doing good, thank you. Cannot complain for a beautiful Wednesday morning.
I know, and you know, if you complain, nobody's listening anyway, Lauren. So you might as well not bother. That's what I always say. I can't complain. No, even if I tell my cat goes, "Mommy, it's all about me." Just like I bet your
Yep.
kid, right? Yeah, that's what it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
So we'll continue with how beautiful and amazing today is and every other day.
Fun with Deborah coming on. We got a lot of good responses on last week. Last week was definitely the pep talk week, wasn't it? We'll have to do that
Yeah,
again.
it was. It put everyone in the right mindset, so I
And
loved it.
I remember from last week that I love so much. Your ego is not your amigo.
Yeah.
I love
I
that.
had to put that one in the chat. It was so good.
I know. So every time I think about it, every time my little ego gets all puffed up, I go, "Your ego is not your amigo." I thought that was great. But
Sure,
take us away. We got a great show this week, and so let's get us started.
Okay, perfect. So give me a couple of seconds. I'm going to go ahead. Good morning, Emma.
Morning, Emma. Wouldn't be a show without Emma in the morning.
She says that was her favorite too. It was so good. Let me go ahead and share my screen for everyone.
Hey, you're learning your new technology, Lauren. You're going. We can see your screen. You're getting it now. It took you a couple weeks, but you got your new technology down.
Oh my good. And you know what? I typically work on a Mac, and so it was going from Mac to a PC. So it was like a completely foreign language for me.
Yeah,
But
that's
I think
hard.
we got it. So good morning again, everyone. My name is Lauren Simpson. I'm with the SBDC, or the Small Business Development Center. We are a national program with over 1,000 locations across the country, and we offer no-cost services to local small businesses. Now, our services are at no cost to you because your tax dollars have already taken care of our fees. So why not partake in our free resources? For the Los Angeles network, we have locations throughout the Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. And you can see our center locations on the map in front of you. Now note, if we don't have a center in your city, you are able to get connected with one of our centers still, and you can meet with one of our advisors. Now, I just mentioned advising. So our advisors are business experts. You might get a guru like Miss Lori Williams, who's amazing with all things numbers. But our business experts have expertise in the areas of marketing, as well as business planning, licensing and permitting, contracts, you name it, we've got it. And then we also offer virtual training. So they're comprehensive workshops to help you adapt to grow your business. That's what we're here for. We're here to support you and help you grow. So again, we're here to help. Be sure to get in contact with us today for those of you in our service area. So that's going to be the Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, or Ventura counties. Please make sure you give us a call at area code 866-588-7232. If you'd rather reach us online, you can go to smallbizla.org/new client. Now, for those of you who have reached us, outside of our service area, you can go to americassbdc.org/find your SBDC. With that, Lori, I'm going to stop my screen share. Quick housekeeping. For those of you who have joined us, please be sure and have questions, please be sure to put those into the Q&A. Again, questions into the Q&A. We'll reserve the chat for any tidbits or information that Lori would like to share with you. And with that, Lori, I'm going to hand it over to you. Good morning again.
Good morning. Good morning. Lauren, all I want to do real quick is go over my upcoming webinars, and Lauren's going to put all this information in the chat. So I have my financial literacy webinars, and she's got the updated information with all the dates. So some of these dates are old, but she's got ones for October as well that she's putting in the chat. So I have a part financial literacy class that I'm doing now. You can take one, you can take all three, you can take them in any order. I plan on continuing to do these every month or so with a couple weeks in between. The first one is just basic accounting and financial record keeping, what you need to know. The second one, using an Excel document for financial modeling and forecasting. I go over a small sample company and build an Excel document and show you what the minimum amount of information you need to know. And then number three, we get more of a deeper dive, as Lauren always uses the term deeper dive, into the financials with performance measurements, percentages, etc. And then I also have a sales tax seminar, because many people that sell out of state don't realize that they may need to charge sales tax. So I include a sales tax seminar every other month, because a lot of people I'm finding, especially if they're using Shopify, they may not be doing their sales tax properly. So Lauren, I'm really excited to have our next guest on the show. JAC Interiors is owned by Christine and Andrea. And Lauren, can you quickly put the picture up of some of the beautiful work that she does? And it's Andrea. I have an Andrea and an Andrea, and I told Christine I keep getting mixed up. So it's Andrea. Lauren, can you throw up real quick one of the beautiful pictures of her interior design work? JAC Interiors has been in business, and I'll have Christine say the exact date, I don't recall, but for quite some time. I remember the very first time that I met Christine, and I bet you it's got to be 15 years ago. I would say that JAC Interiors is my longest client through the SBDC. And as you can see, just gorgeous, gorgeous work. Thank you so much, Lauren, for showing some of that. The website's beautiful, the work is beautiful, and I wanted everybody just to get a feel for the company. I was real excited when Christine said she would come on the show today. As many of you know, I am always, I guess we'll just use the word preaching, because I preach the use of Excel documents and the need for managerial accounting. And managerial accounting is not the financial accounting when we're talking about doing your tax returns or having P&Ls to show the bank, etc. Managerial accounting is creating internal documents. Excel is usually the opportune one to use, but creating some form of internal document that allows you to make decisions in your company, make better decisions. So what I'm expressing is, you don't make decisions on your gut. You don't just say, well, I don't know, just wing it. What you do is you actually have a management system. Now, with Christine, and like I said, she'll have to confirm it's at least 10 years, if not a little bit longer, we started working to put an Excel management system in place for her. And she's been using it for that time period. So I was very excited to welcome Christine to the show to have a discussion of how the system has changed the company and her process of internal decision making. Christine, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
It's
Good
so
to see you, Lori.
Yeah, I'm poking it out a little bit on my video today. I was telling everybody I can't fix it, but I'm here and I'm home in person. So, Christine, what the first thing I have to say to you is that you are officially a CFO, amongst other things within the company, but I'm focusing on the word because most of the people we have on the show and most of the people I talk with the SBDC say, I'm not good at numbers. I don't know numbers. So let's see, let's get your background. You went to school for accounting and bookkeeping and you've been a CFO for other companies? No.
Definitely not.
Well, tell us about the company, when you started. I don't know when you started, and a little bit of background to get us started with the discussion.
Sure. Yes. So JAC Interiors was sort of officially founded in 2012. That's when we did all our paperwork with the IRS and all that. But Andrea and I had met actually when our boys, who are now in college this year, when they were like 2 or 3 years old. So I've known Andrea a long time. She was a working designer here in LA. I met her back then. As many people, I had a life change about 12 years ago. I got separated, divorced from my husband, and I thought, I'm going to do something for myself. I went back to school, got a degree in interior design, and then Andrea and I hooked up together and started working together. And that first year, I always tell the story, Lori, like our first year, our gross sales was $60,000, which is barely enough to pay groceries, right? But now our gross sales up to almost $2 million. So in a decade, we grew. I mean, I'm pretty proud of that number, especially because I have no financial experience. My background is in communications. I was in PR for a while. I was in politics. So I'd never owned a business before this. And, creatively, that part was easy for me, being able to come up with designs and work together with our clients and all that. The difficult part was really the financial, the accounting, and as our business was growing quickly, understanding how to manage that and how to understand what was happening, which is why I found you. I think I was doing a Google search or something. I don't know exactly how I found you, but the idea that it was a free service that was definitely appealing, and it was in Santa Monica, which was close to where Andrea and I did a lot of our work. And so we just took a chance and thought, we're gonna just come and meet you and see if you can help us figure out, what we were doing. So that's kind of how it started.
I don't remember how it was worded, but it was kind of like, well, Christine's kind of been selected to be the accounting person here. I remember.
Yes. Yeah. Of the two of us, I had more, probably more tendency towards numbers than Andrea. So that's why I got elected.
The detail person. So let us walk, because we've got so much to talk about. I don't even know what direction I want to go in, but what I do know is if I just bring up something, you will take off on it. So guys, what's going to be really interesting is Christine is going to be talking about what documents we created, what purpose they provided, and then over the course of the business, how the documents supported you in decision making. So why don't we first start with some of the key documents we created, and also, Christine, if I may, a lot of people say to me, oh, just give me a template. And I try to explain so often, I can't. I have to make it with you. And they get mad. They're like, Lori, just give me a template. So can you also express that we didn't make these within one call? They took time.
No.
And you have to do the processes. So please explain, when you talk about these documents, how they evolve through processes. They're not templates you filled out. Okay, just run with it, Christine. You go with it.
Well, so I guess when in our first meeting, I think it was a little bit baby steps, because I think you were just trying to teach me some of the basics, which was great. Just understanding what a P&L was, what the difference between cash and accrual, those sort of basic things were helpful, because I wasn't really even understanding, these very basic concepts, but quickly learned some of those. And I think every time we met, I would come in and be worried about, am I going to be able to understand what Lori is saying to me? Because you are extremely proficient, and I find myself being able to follow to some degree, but almost every meeting I would have this aha where you would say something and I'd be like, oh, I get it, and so that was amazing to have that experience every time, and every time to build on it. So eventually,
numbers, I want to add to that. It's so true, isn't it, Christine, that you have to go back and work with them, because you got to get a feel. Like if I say to you, these numbers aren't true because it's a cash accounting, until you go and put the numbers in and about what's going in your company, you got to have a visceral feel. I have to have a visceral feel to start doing the magic of monitoring and predicting that I do, because you start to feel the company's ebbs and flow, and then the documents support and suggest. Keep going.
Yes. Okay. So anyway, one of those early on meetings that we had, you had suggested, there is a difference between you and other companies, because you're not only are you selling a product, right? We sell furniture that we buy at cost and mark up and sell on to our clients, but you also sell labor. You sell your fees, et cetera. So that was something that was interesting for us to figure out. How do we calculate that? How do we monitor that in our business? And so, and also we were growing pretty fast in the beginning. And there was a point where we were like, oh, we have to hire more people because we're getting more work and we're income's coming in and we just got to hire more people. So we did that. And as a, knee-jerk reaction. And I think at one point, you and I discussed, geez, I think we may have gone too far. I think this isn't quite, I'm starting to understand my P&L and my income statements, and it's looking a little tighter than I think it should. And I wanted to really understand what was going on. And did I need to pull back on staff or just try to get more work, or how was I going to deal with this? And so one of the things we did was we created this GP profit, gross profit percentage template, I guess, which had formulas built into it. And that was a game changer. Like once I understood that, which I think it took 1 or 2 sessions together before I exactly understood what it was and how to use it. But what it did was it helped us to not only look at our business as a whole, right? And are we making a profit and what is impacting that? For example, revenue is revenue, but that's not, how do you get to your net income at the end of the day? And for us, obviously we had income that was cost of goods, right? And then what we marked up and charged to our clients. So that was our income in our income statement. And then also the design fees would come in, commission, all those things. And then we'd have to subtract out, well, what did we pay for all of the cost of goods? And then what are our expenses? So I started to understand what a COG was, what an SGA was, and what that mean for our business. And what was really interesting was at one point you had, and because I was trying to get my head around, I remember this, trying to get my head around, well, how do we calculate, everybody gets paid a salary, right? Yeah. Everyone's contributing to all this work. And, you can be working on 2 or 3 clients in one day. So how am I going to understand what is happening, how to calculate what my expenses are, what the contribution of everybody and through their salary is per project? And you came up with this formula, which I'm sure I won't be able to exactly describe, and you can, Lori, if you want to.
I'll walk through all this stuff she's saying in a minute, guys. Keep going.
Yeah. So anyway, so we had a formula that actually took, to be very basic about it, a portion of the salary pie and put a portion of it in when we calculated each project. And it was based on a certain percentage of the overall, right? And also, what we calculated, we thought that the time would be spent on that particular client. And as we got more experienced, we got better at estimating not only the COGS, but also the, how much time we thought it would spend to work on the project, just depending on the scope and everything. So we were able to create this formula and create a gross profit percentage, which helped us to then understand what our net income was, our gross income, no, net income, I don't know. Anyway, profit, sorry. And then what our net profit was based on everything coming out, right? And so that's what really was left at the end of the day, after, all of our costs came out. So we use that as an overall, like, to look at our business overall, and then we used it on a per project basis. And I can go into more detail about how we use that, but
I'm
Lori
talk. No, first of all, see what I mean, guys? Doesn't she sound like a CFO? I mean, it's amazing.
I don't really want to be a CFO. Stop calling me that.
Okay, so you're the CFO for your company, but what's amazing, and the point is it, Christine, that I'm making is you have, and I used this word while we were talking offline, you have a visceral a relationship with these numbers. You understand them. You're not having to memorize something out of a book and speak it. You understand it. So I'm going to go and unpack some of the brilliant things you said throughout so everybody follows it. So she first talked about her business being different. And it's different in the fact that the services have a different profit margin, a gross profit margin than the products. To be honest, reselling products, and especially in interior design world, it doesn't have these huge profit margins all the time. Depends on the project. So they change. And then the services, that profit margin is dependent on the staff because she's got employees and staff. So we had to create this, what we call blended rate. Now, I see the need for blended rate in almost all companies now, because if you're buying products from a manufacturer, even if you're making them yourself, you're usually having a manufacturer create them. So you're acting like a distributor. You've got different costs, and therefore you've got different selling prices. By default, you have different profit margins. You have to identify what's the profit margin on this and what's the profit margin on that. Because like we saw, for those that are frequent flyers, when Joey was on from Harman, the survey company, he talked about how he thought he was making money, but he wasn't, and he was selling more of the widgets with a lower profit margin than the widgets with the higher one. So first we had to do is say, okay, all profit isn't equal. We got to look at what you're selling. And then I had to create a formula that said, well, what does this person's activities do? What a percentage of time in the profit did they comprise their activities? And we had to say, okay, here's a formula based on these projections. And the reason we needed to is every project, which Christine's going to get to in a second on how she manages this, every project in her company, and many companies, many service/product companies or service companies, the projects are very unique. They're like creating a custom product every time. You may use this employee versus that employee. You may sell this widget versus that widget. So you have to do an estimate before you even speak to the client, putting together all these components to make sure you hit that targeted benchmarked gross profit. And that's the key to the system. You first figure out by allocating a certain amount of your cost, a certain amount of your overhead, and you get a targeted gross profit that you cannot sell below. And then you make sure before you provide an estimate, you hit that target. Then you make sure during the work in progress, you're hitting that target, and then you make sure when you bill it, you hit that target. That is controlling the whole process, which doesn't guarantee success, but it guarantees that if you hit your benchmarks, it will, and it guarantees that if you didn't, you're going to know. So Christine, that was just kind of an overview of everything you said perfectly. Take it from there into how you're managing the projects like you were going to speak on.
Yes. Okay. So going back to the idea that we, wanted to understand the types of projects that we should be looking for. What kinds of clients do we want? And we had always assumed, well, it's just the bigger the better, the bigger the budget. I mean, obviously, that's what we want to do. And Lori was very adamant about it. It's not necessarily the project with the largest revenue. It's about really breaking it down and understanding, are you making that markup for that project? Are you using the best staff for that project, and so therefore making more money on the fee side? Are you getting commission? Do you have a contractor that you're getting commission for? There's all these factors that build into it. So we were able to use this formula and basically calculate per project all those factors and be able to, first of all, decide whether we even want to take on the project. In the beginning, we were so hungry. We were like, oh, we'll just take anything. If somebody wanted to work with us, we were like, if you want to work with us, we should work with you. And so we would just sort of do whatever we could. And of course, that is part of building a business. But at some stage, you have to be smarter about it. And you have to understand that it's okay. This is one of the hardest things I lost sleep over, was saying no to a client.
Yeah.
And saying to them, actually, this does not seem like the right fit, either because their budget was just too low, we didn't think we could deliver, or we didn't think we were going to make our gross profit. And so we couldn't, there were some clients in the beginning who wanted a project fee, and we would do those projects, and we understood later on that that was not working for us. And so we went to a pretty much exclusive hourly rate basis where we charged for our fees. So I would go to bed at night thinking, oh my, we just said no to something, and is something else going to come that's
Right.
that's better? And it would, and it would start, and that would start happening, and we are now in a position, and our business, our industry was one of the ones that benefited from this pandemic, right? Because people were in their homes, and we were as busy as we've ever been. And the fact that we had this sort of system, this sort of way of looking at what clients we should take, was really important for us, because we were able to say no, knowing that we had other clients that we could take on that were really better for us. And in the end, we would make a profit, which is important, but also I think it was just a better experience overall for our clients as well, because we were all feeling like, okay, this is going to work. We knew we were going to make what we deserved to make in terms of, an income, and they were happy because we were invested and we were excited. It was just seemed like a win-win. And so what
on what you said a bit, Christine, right now, because this is beautiful. And I'm going to ask Lauren to put some of this bits of wisdom into the chat. So did you notice, guys, one of the first thing you said, what type of clients do we want to get? Most companies don't ask that question. And in that, if they keep taking on clients where I remember the expression, do you want to be more tired and more broke? And then I would always say, why don't you go to the beach that day, right? Because when you're taking on these clients just to have them, you're technically paying them to work for you, with you. You're not benefiting. And Christine, you pointed out another aspect. When you take on clients that isn't good for you, it's just like, I never did this analogy before. It's just like eating food that is not good for you. It doesn't make you feel good the whole time. And you have this moment, but it feels bad. So you end up having this kind of hesitancy to your client, and they feel it and you feel it. And then what happens? You get mad at the client, but it's your you took them on.
It's our own fault. Yeah. Totally.
And people get mad at the client then, and it creates this really negative experience all around, where if they just said no. And then the other part that I loved what you said is that, you worried at night if you said no, would a client come? But they always do. Now, this is what part that I have seen in my own company, and I've seen in others, and I can't explain it away. This isn't a number thing. But when you stand up and you say no, you do end up having the universe or what have you. I don't know. It brings the right client to you. I remember the first time for my business, like 20 years ago, when it wasn't going to work, and I said no, and I lost sleep, and then I found a client. And then I've heard other people the same thing. I just said no. And so taking on clients that are not, well, first of all, you got to understand, like Christine said, what clients aren't good for you, right? And then when you understand, taking them on doesn't benefit anybody at all, and it ends up harming you. And so those were such wonderful words of wisdom, because I see what happens is, like, the first X amount of years, people get clients that they should have never taken on. And that's why I always say there comes a point where you have to fire your long-term clients. And I know if Kelly, I don't know if Kelly's watching in the audience today. I know she's been really busy, so she may not be on, but she's had an experience, so she'll know what I'm talking about, where she had to fire a majority of her clients because if she continued to work, she was never going to make any money. So I didn't want to interrupt you, Christine, but your
no, that's fine.
Are so valuable. I want to make sure we stop. And Lauren's been capturing what I just said, and she throws it in the chat because people copy the chat, they look at it later. So keep going, keep telling your story, Christine.
Okay, sounds good. So again, so once we started doing this and started being comfortable with it, we would we had an Excel, of course, document that had all of our new clients and their estimated gross profit margin percentage, right? And so we'd start with that. And then we would do sometimes monthly, but for sure quarterly. We would look at, depending on how long-term the project was, we would look at the work in progress percentage. And again, compare it and say, how are we doing? If we're not doing exactly the way we think, is that just because it's where we are in the process? Do we need to be looking at what we're spending on the COGS? Do we need to be looking at, our time, that kind of thing? And so we would look at that, and then we would be able to track things. Sometimes we'd be able to self-correct. Sometimes there were things that just you can't change. For example, last year, there were a lot of price increases on COGS, and we had to obviously reflect that in what we were spending. There's also some retailers who have started offering the trade price to regular customers. So like, for example, Restoration Hardware has a membership that costs $200 or something like that a year, and you get the trade price. Well, that was a huge hit for us because we really liked their work. And so we started knocking off we started building things that were similar ourselves. So we had to kind of adjust. We were seeing these numbers, and we were noticing that clients were saying, oh, I have a membership, I'm going to buy all the RH stuff myself. And that was 20 grand of markup that just disappeared from our bottom line. So there were some things that we had to adjust as we went. And so now we're, changing the way we do things a little bit around that. So, and then we have a closeout GP percentage, right, that we look at. So when we're done with the project, we look at it and we compare that. And that obviously goes into the average of all of our projects for the year. And then we come up with, okay, what's our overall average of gross profit? And there was one time, I don't know if I was with you, Lori, or not, but there was one time when the average exactly equaled our profit in the P&L. And I was like, oh my God,
you did
I can't believe this happened.
Yes, you did.
It was so weird. I was like, well, I could expect like a couple percentage points off, but it was the exact same number. And I was like, this is weird. This is not Lori somehow making this happen. Like, it was really funny.
Wait, I always say it's no different than if you have a plan to lose a certain weight. You follow the exercise program, you follow the diet, you're going to know that the scale's going to say this. And that's and I always tell people a profit and loss statement is historical data. Decisions are done, no more chances. That's why what Christine's saying, we have a form we put in, and we look at what the GP is before we tell the client the price. We do it during the process, so we make sure we bid correctly. We check after to make sure we bid correctly, and then technically, I always say, even though don't do this, you shouldn't have to look at the P&L. You're profitable. Christine, one of the words you said, and I want you to elaborate on it, is how time. You sell time, and a lot of our clients and people listening do. So we got to talk about timesheets, including you guys' time, because to make sure that you recognize that I don't care if you're the owner, you're selling your time, you need a timesheet too. Talk briefly about how to incorporate timesheets and how important they are in this process.
Okay. Well, of course it is 2022, so we don't have a timesheet, but it's a time app. So there are various ones out there. It's called a time tracker. Ours is, and it's basically an app. And each time we start a new project with a client, we create their various categories. We really have, I think it's really 3 basic categories. So one is client meeting. So we separate this out because every time we meet with the client, I want to know that that's a separate time. And we don't charge any differently necessarily, but it's just a way that we keep track of how often are we, seeing the client. And pardon?
That's awesome, Christine, that you said that. Yeah. Lord, please note, she is tracking the time that she is meeting for clients. And guys, you've heard me talk about those are non-billable, and you need to track the non-billable because they still are a cost internally. Thank you, Christine, for bringing that up.
Well, actually, ours are billable, which is why. So, when we meet with the client, it's billable. The only time it's billed at a different rate is our initial consult, when we're just meeting them and trying to get to know them and understand whether this is going to work. We just charge a flat fee, which is usually $250, and it can go an hour to 2 hours, and we just charge that flat fee. But once we sign a contract and they are our client, then we bill every. We're not lawyers. Sorry if they're lawyers, but we don't charge for, like, if I get an email or if I get a quick call, I don't necessarily charge for that time. Okay. But if there is it's a lengthy response to an email or a scheduled call or a meeting or something like that, I am clocking in and out just like you would with a timesheet card, but it's on my app. So I will, and one thing that we learned pretty quickly as well is for each of those clocking in and out, there are notes that we're all required to put. They can be very short, very quick, because we do invoices that are very detailed so that our client can understand what are we charging our time for, what are we doing. So that is something we didn't do in the beginning, and we learned our lesson because there were clients who said, oh, I'm not paying this. I don't know what this was that you did. That seems like too much for what you're charging, and et cetera. So we started initiating, literally, I do not allow anybody to turn in an hour without a note of some sort. And so there's the client meeting, there's the design phase, and then there's the project management phase. So those are the three different times that you would see. Well, and also drafting. I don't do that personally, but we have somebody who does drawings and drafting and invoicing, and those are billed at different rates. So we have different rates for different staff and experience level, and then we have different rates for what you're doing. So if my purchaser is doing an invoice or doing ordering, we're billing that at a lower rate than if, for example, we're working on the design of a kitchen or something. It's just a different level of experience and time. So that's basically, I think, is that answering your question about what we do with our?
Yeah. And guys, okay. You can see that, in many ways, it's so funny because I didn't share with you guys in the audience this, but I had been a CFO for a company that had similar type business model for like 7 years, interim CFO, if that counts on interim. But I used to always say, I would have all these Excel documents and I would be doing all this to manage the cash. And I would say to myself, it's just furniture. It's so complicated. It's just friggin' furniture. That was being like frustrated with it. But where I'm going with this is you can see your business model by default has billing rates for this person and this person and this person. And it's true of most service companies when you have employees as well that are offering different services. And unless you monitor each person's activities within the project, you have no way of knowing that you're really profitable or not. And the P&Ls don't tell you this. They tell you in general, but they don't tell you. And so I thought it was beautiful that you went in there. Repeat for us that app that you're using so Lauren can put that in the chat as well.
Okay. Yeah, let me look. I'll look at the exact name. It's on my, okay. It's called Hours Tracker.
Okay.
And it's a little piggy bank with a time clock on it, the app.
Yeah.
So
allows the notes to go in there, and there's a ton of them, as you say, but I just always like to refer to them. And I remember, and I wanted to go back, and I think it was you that said this. There was one time where you were first telling me there's no way, this is back years ago, there's no way we raise our prices, our clients will leave, and all this. Well, you have to, or you're going to be, can't even buy a quart of milk, right? And all of a sudden we met for one of our quarter meetings, because we used to meet quite regularly every quarter to go over the numbers. And I looked at the numbers and they were phenomenal. Your GP shot up like 10%. You were finally getting in the zone where it says this is worth my time. And I saw it, and this is funny because I didn't tell you this. I saw it a couple quarters in a row, but I didn't want to bring it up because I thought she's doing it. I don't want to make her afraid again, because you were so afraid to do the increases. And never mentioned it, right? So it came to, I never told you this. So it came to the third quarter and the numbers were still high. And I was so curious. And I thought, she's got a habit. She's not going to be afraid. I'm going to ask. And you probably don't remember this. And it may have been Andrea that said this. I don't know which of the two of you said it, but I said, how did you do it? And you said, you know what? The Excel document became my boss. It was no longer me saying, I got to charge this. The Excel document was my boss. I'd look at it and I'd see that I'm not going to make any money. The Excel gave me the power to feel strong to communicate with the client. Now I paraphrased and put some of my words in, but I'd like to speak to that, how it changed. We know what it did financially, we know that, but also we had a little inkling when you said I go to bed afraid and everything. Let's talk on the personal side. You know, I like the word control because I like being in control, but what has this system given you personally and emotionally?
Well, I mean, sleep, allowing me to sleep better. But honestly, I'm sure I was the one that said that about that the spreadsheet is the boss, because you know, numbers don't lie, and when you're month after month, it's working, then you can make these kind of hard decisions about not taking clients. Or in fact, last year we increased our prices again. And it was a scary, risky thing. And we were like, well, we did it once before and it worked. Let's do it. You know, everybody's doing it, really. Remember, that was last year and all prices were going up, and we thought, well, I guess we can do it too. And I felt more confident about doing that because I knew that we would see the progress or not progress in our systems. And it's been a year and it's been working. We certainly don't have people going away because of what we're charging. The only people who are not clients who are saying no to us for the most part are because we don't have time right away, or their just overall budget just is not realistic, and we're comfortable telling them it's not realistic because we know that that's not something that's going to be a mutually beneficial relationship down the line. And being able to do those things has been, you know, because I feel, you know, having my own business and having employees, I mean, we're small, we're tiny. It's Andrea and I, and we have 2 staff. But those 2 staff, you know, they count on my decision making and my ability to manage this business for their well-being, for their income, for their livelihood. And so, you know, there were many sleepless nights about decisions, and sometimes I was too obsessing over the P&L, and you did say stop doing that, which is fine, and I have, but you know, there's something quite different when you are the one responsible for yourself and other people. And so having these kind of tools has been, you know, really game changing for us. And I just feel so much more confident in being able to make these longer term decisions, decide whether to hire or not hire, decide whether to give raises, you know, that sort of thing. It's based on really looking at numbers and knowing, you know, what we're all going to need. So, you know, did that answer your question? Or did I ramble?
It did, and I just say as a side note to you, I don't know what words to say other than warms my heart. I mean, to listen to you and to hear you speak so confidently and so capable of making proper decisions for your company, for your employees, and knowing that I had a part of that is just wonderful, because we haven't spoken in a bit. I mean, not that
it's been
long,
a few years since COVID, I think.
Since COVID.
Well, I gotta say, Lori, I would not be here without you. I mean, honestly, because in that beginning, I was like a deer in headlights. I had no idea, and you were so patient and funny and accessible, and just like I looked forward to our meetings, but I also was like, okay, I know this is going to be sort of mind overwhelming, which it always was, but there was always a point when we met where I felt like I'm getting some of this, and I'm going to go away, I'm going to think some more, and I'm going to get some more of this, and I'm going to progress along. And we would not be here with our almost 2 million gross sales without you. And so if you have an opportunity to work with Lori, definitely do it, because it's an amazing, it really has impacted our business.
And you know, you were always prepared for the meetings. And what I always have to tell people is it's not something I can, you know, if it's a small, tiny company and it only has a little bit of transaction and it's really easy to kind of get a control over immediately, it can be a meeting too. But for ones that have complications, I have to figure it out. Like that percentage of salary, it took me, I would be like, Christine,
I remember,
I gotta figure this out. I gotta sit down in some quiet time. come up with some way of calculating this, because it's not always obvious, which brings us to a topic, and it's based on a question that somebody in the audience had, and it's one that I really want to delve into, is the need for customization. I just got the question, and I told you, Christine, I get this all the time, and it's one that troubles me because I'm trying to always answer it, and I don't want to sound like I'm not trying to help. So first of all, before I'm going to ask the question aloud, and then I'm going to make a comment, and then I'm going to throw it to you. So we got a question from Auntie, and it's, how can we get a copy of the spreadsheet? And so the first simple answer is you can't. These are proprietary information, but the most important thing is number two, they would do you no good whatsoever. Each of these spreadsheets have to be created. When you talk about a profit and a loss statement, you can download it because it follows a format. It's financial accounting, just like a tax form. If I said to you, you got to fill out a tax form, where do I get the form? Here's the form. Here it is. You got it. So we're talking about managerial accounting, and they have to be created. So before I throw this to you, Christine, to answer, I'm going to say that, however, the good news is I work with the SBDC still. I get paid by the government. You don't have to pay. I will help you guys make a spreadsheet. Lauren's got her information in the chat. Give your email address again, Lauren. She will get you in touch with me to schedule to work with you, just like I did with Christine. So Christine, help people understand that this isn't a template. You're saying it's a template now because you created a template that you personally use. This never was a template. It never was one. So you take it from there.
I mean, the whole point of it is it's customized to our business at the very base level, right? So that idea that, we have a certain amount of salary that we, I remember that formula you created that had the salaries per person tied to what we billed out in fees, because those were all different, and how that was all then, sort of added back in to the formula to help with that per project GP percentage. And that was just literally based on the exact numbers from my company. And so that, the idea, I guess, is something that obviously can be used and customized, but the actual formula, it wouldn't help anybody because it's not something that is tailorable necessarily.
And that's what I have to do is and this is one of the reasons I'm good at it, is that I'm old and been around for a long time, right? And so what happens is that I've seen all these examples and I've created some of these formulas, and I'm able to go back into my mind and go, how did I create that? What can I create again? And you know what I'm really always trying to figure out, and I don't necessarily word it to the client this way, but I'm trying to figure out the variables. What are the variables that to this? And it's funny, I don't usually express this, but I've got an undergrad in business and a MBA in finance and all that, but I have a 2-year degree in biology and research. And so I think those 2-year degree, applied associates in science, before I switched over to business, I look at everything like a research. What's the variables? What's the constants? What's
interesting?
In this scientific study? But that one, even if I was to sit down and do it again, I'd have to probably spend a couple hours trying to remember how I came up with that one. All I remember with that formula is being, okay, this is confusing, but it's a necessity. And so many times when I try to figure out how to do these templates, I always think, but it's got to be known. Otherwise, this client will never be able to manage it. So I've got to figure it out. So when you say, the concept can be applied, I always use clay. I always say, I've got a block of clay, and I have this block of clay, and I always use the block of clay. So it's always a mathematical equation, historical data, but then I mold the block of clay to the company's situation. And the more company is involved, the more it's got different people and pricing and products. And the other thing, I'm going to end on it and throw it back to you, Christine, is one of the things that I'm saying lately is back, I've been around for a long time, and people listen to the show for a while. I grew up in the country, and they knew I grew up in the country. And so in the country, working on a farm, or we had Bob's Tire Shop, or we had, some, and most of the time they took cash. So the business models, you could pretty much weren't complicated. My mother baked cookies. sold them at the flea market for cash, and it wasn't very complicated. But today, no business is not complicated, if I can say it that way.
Right.
You get a doggy sweater, you go to a flea market, you got to have the sales rate for there. You got to figure out how much you're paying for yarn. You got to make sure. It's like you can't be in business today doing anything without having some sort of financial tracking requirements, government regulation. No, you're buying something from someplace, you got to make sure you're marking up. So the minute you decide to do anything in business, you have to embrace, I'm going to use that word, embrace, and acknowledge the need to have some level of financial sophistication, unless it's purely a hobby and a charity and you don't care, which there's nothing against. There's nothing against that. But if you need to make money on any level, you have to embrace and acknowledge these type of templates. There is no small business that doesn't have to have this type of knowledge.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I remember one of the earlier sessions, and you had said, well, you guys just don't sell widgets. you do other things. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. We're not widgets. We're selling our expertise. But we are selling some widgets. And so it's like all built in together. And I always just think, God, it would be so much easier if we just sold widgets, but we don't. So we had to come up with this process. One of the things too that I think you included in that template, I mean, I talked about the salaries and how those were incorporated, but you also, I remember saying, but we pay rent and we have expenses. How are you going to do that? And how are you going to incorporate that? Because those are things we spend on every single client, and you were able to incorporate that into the formula as well. And so, that is something that sort of detail is something that you will be able to help people with, and then they can just sort of have that. And then obviously, I remember I used to say to you, should we be changing it? Our salaries changed. And once in a while you would say, well, how much? And I would say, well, only this much. And you're like, relax, we can use the current template, so, but I think it's important to, think about that and decide, all right, well, once you have it, it probably will last for the duration, but you may need to go back and look and just, sort of gut check that and think, okay, does this make sense, or should we be adjusting it?
You just brought up two
go.
really important things here. And so that has to do with your overhead. A lot of times what I see, especially with small companies, they know what they're selling it for. They know what it costs, but they don't blend into the formula any of their overhead. So they don't have profit, the net profit, and they're not making any money. And so then people go, and then I hear this, it's amazing and kind of troubling for me personally, how many of these bizarre myths that are in the small business world. It is the most ridiculous myths I've ever seen in my life. And so I have people call me and they go, well, I've been told you take a third. No, you don't. That's not logic. I've been told that many times. Take a third for what? I can't remember. It was so stupid. You do a third for yourself, third for this. And I'm like, where in the world does this third come from? There's no logic.
Yeah.
So out the overhead expense, or people go, well, somebody said just put 10%. I'm like, what's the basis of this number? So you have to look at the historical data and what I call the cost structure. You hear me talk about the cost structure a lot. And by the way, guys, the financial literacy classes that Lauren's put in, number 2 and number 3 class goes into this. Number 2, when I go, what's the minimum you need to know, is really the exposed small amount of clay. Number 3 is application of the clay, as we're talking. So another way to get exposed to what I'm saying and get the basics of it is to go into those webinars 2 and 3 that's coming up. But having the overhead expenses are crucial. And what you also mentioned is the minute that I call it the inputs or the outputs change. So if the selling price changes, if the cost to produce changes, if your overhead changes, if you hire somebody, if you change the rent, anytime you make a substantial change, the formulas have to be recalculated. If it's just small and it will kind of weed its way out, you don't. But if you make a substantial change, you have to, just like you said, because the cost went up, you had to increase prices, which is another mistake that small businesses make. And I want to express this with clarity right now due to the inflation that we're experiencing. When a larger company sees an increase in the cost, they immediately up the prices, and we see that in the marketplace. When a small company does it, they go, oh no, I don't want to lose anybody, and they don't they at their already so thin profit margins, and they end up making less money and sometimes losing money. With the inflation pressures that we're experiencing, if your cost went up, you need to reanalyze your gross profit margins and increase your selling price, just like Christine speaking of. And although none of us want to pay a price increase, okay, none of us want it, we understand. If you, in fact, Joey, I think on the call before, he said he had to go to one of his clients and tell him there was a price increase because he hadn't managed it properly on that. And the client said, I was wondering how long you were going to let us buy at this. Well, I knew you were, you weren't making any money. So a lot of times, we're trained as clients to negotiate. Although we want to complain, we know when we're getting a below market price, and we understand when we're watching the news and then somebody says there's a price increase.
Yep.
Thoughts on that, Christine?
Yeah, I mean, we actually had a client early on who said that to us as well, when we were doing a project fee, and because he was a developer, and he said, you can take pictures and I'll help you, get your referrals and things like that. And so we bought into that, and, we were working way more than we were getting paid. And at one point we went to him and said, okay, this is, you've asked for a few things outside of the remit, we need to charge separately. And he said, yeah, you probably should have been doing that this whole time or whatever. Yeah, probably. So, but that was early, and we were learning, and we were, and maybe we did and he did help us get some referrals. So maybe that was okay decision at that time. We would never do that now. But, we're a mature business, and we have, enough business so we can be a little more choosy and, more confident in making those kinds of decisions. And, that's why we increased the price last year during COVID. I think it was the beginning of this year or the end of last year, something like that. And, it hasn't impacted nobody's turned away from us because of that. So I feel good about that. And, that we're able to, and, maybe we'll even think about doing it again next year. I don't know. We'll
you may have to, yeah, you may have. I mean, and I'm just so amazed and impressed with where you've come. So we've got a few minutes, and so I'm going to say, anybody has any questions, put them in the Q&A. I can make sure we get your questions asked. But Christine, I want to take a moment to say what type of clients you work with. I want to make sure our audience knows what you can do for them, perhaps. And so give us a little bit of a marketing about what type of clients and what kind of work you do.
Okay, we are predominantly residential. We are a full service interior design company. So we can work on a project and new builds, for example, where we review the architectural plans, and we have input in the very, very beginning, and then work all the way through, sometimes years later, to do the final install, where we're literally hanging art and wallpaper and placing furniture. So we do everything from picking slabs for your kitchen counters and plumbing to wallpaper, art, furniture, pillows, the whole thing. Our website's really good about sort of describing our services. But we will take remodels. We do furnishings only. So it's not that we only take the new builds or larger construction projects. We will do remodels. I think those are fun sometimes, and we've done a couple of Spanish houses that we create in a more modern way, which is fun. And then we'll just do furnishings. Sometimes people get to a point where they bought a new house and they just want our help with furnishings, and so we'll do that as well. So it really is pretty, we're pretty flexible. The one thing we don't do it anymore really is just like maybe in the very beginning, if you just wanted your living room done, we would do it. Yeah. But now that doesn't make sense for us. We really need to have either a partial home or a full home remodel, just because for our gross profit, that is
Yeah.
tends to be more what works for us. So.
Perfect. Well, we're pretty much out of time. I'm going to answer one question. Leslie wanted to know on how many spreadsheets are average to have for a small business. So I'm going to attack that one, Leslie. You know, at the minimum, you need to have a spreadsheet that tells you what your gross profits are based on your selling point, your selling price, and your cost of goods for each and every project, widget, etc. Right? So you need to be able to know what your gross profit is. You need to know what your expenses are. So that's maybe another spreadsheet. And then usually I have one that I bring together so you can use as a forecaster, or you can see where you are. So in the minimum, I have at least 3 or 4 tabs that I create. Christine, about how many tabs do you, because you've got a pretty elaborate system, but it's not a lot of tabs. I don't want
No, it's not.
for spreadsheets.
Yeah.
It's not, is it?
Yeah. No, it's not. I mean, what we do is we create one for each project. So then that becomes obviously a lot more, but that's a whole Excel on its own. But the sort of master one, I think, is 3 or 4 tabs. It's like that initial, I think it's the one that there's the spreadsheet that has, if we know what the overall budget is for the client, then we can back it out and know what our cost of goods and our labor should be so that we can make profit. Or if they have no idea, then we can sort of think, okay, well, what do we want to spend on COGS and what do we want to mark up? And then it comes up with the total. So that's one. And then the more, specific one that helps us work on our overall annual income statement analysis. And then there's the backup one that you've done that has all the overheads and the salaries and all of that calculated. So we know how to pull that into that other spreadsheet. So it's almost like there's a spreadsheet behind a spreadsheet behind a spreadsheet, because they all seem to be interconnected.
That's one thing, guys. I'm not into nightmare spreadsheets, and they're all color coded and pretty and everything, because you got to be able to look at it immediately and understand. It can't be so complicated that every time you sit down and you think, what? And I have a worksheet that has some background information, but we're only talking like 2 or 3 tabs.
Yeah,
and so
exactly. Yeah.
Once it's created, it's not a lot to manage or anything. It becomes process and it's not overwhelming. Well, Christine, thank you so much. I went over a little bit over, but I just want to give one last second to say a couple words of wisdom you'd like to leave with the audience. But I want to say thank you for coming on and sharing this information. You gave so many valuable gems to the audience today. What would you like to leave with a couple thoughts?
Take risks, and if Lori says it'll be okay, it will. So, and what I mean is trust the numbers and trust yourself. And if we hadn't gone for it and increased our prices, we wouldn't have made a profit last year, and it really did make the difference. So I think sometimes as small business owners who were not taught in this, in accounting and bookkeeping and all that, think we're not capable. But if you take the time to learn and get the guidance, not be afraid to ask for help, then you'll succeed. And you don't try to fix the sink yourself. Get the plumber, like Lori's my plumber. She was, I was always like, how, I don't know how to do this. I'm trying to read a book and I don't get it. And, and she's been so helpful for us. So just trust yourself and then get advice from people who know better as well.
And that's one of the reasons, and I'm going to do a little plug. I usually don't, but I'm going to do a plug for the SBDC that I like. And I've been with the SBDC for over 10 years because I knew the kind of clients I could help the most couldn't afford me. And so by being paid by the government to do this, I felt like it was the best of the both worlds. And that's why I love the fact that I've been with the SBDC. Why I do it, because like I said, I'm a little country girl that wants to help the little small businesses. This is a way to do it. So Lauren, going to bring you back on. Christine, it was so good seeing you. I'm out.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Lauren, wasn't this fabulous?
It was another great show.
Yay. Okay. Thank you.
So good.
Good luck, everybody.
And Christine, you have a few people reaching out. So.
Okay. Sounds good.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great show. We're
Okay.
getting the chat. So, you know, Christine, you made a difference in people's world. Thank you today for being on
Thank
the show.
you.
Many,
Of course.
yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Okay, Lauren, I'm going to take off. I want to say thank you to our frequent flyers that are here every single week. Thank you to the people who've just joined us. Once again, I wanted people to hear that there is a process that you need to do internally, whether you go to the system she's using or not. Just if you watch the show and you said, oh my God, maybe I should managing my numbers a little bit more, that is a benefit of this show. So I wanted to make a mention that next week we're going to talk about legal and tax forms. I've got a client who experienced a situation where she believed one thing to be true of legal structures and tax and found out it not to be true. And I helped her out of it. And she wants to come just kind of share her story. And I'm going to go into detail on taxation for an LLC and S Corp and explain some things because I'm having a lot of clients say to me, I just incorporated it as an LLC because I believed and it's not true. So that's what we're going to do next week. So I'm going to take off, Lauren. You're going to hang around and close us out and everything. And to everybody, I'll see you next week. Thanks for being here. Bye-bye.
Bye, Lori. Thank you. To our guests, be sure to refer back to the chat. You'll be able to see contact information. Be sure to click on those links for Lori's shows. I'm sorry, her sessions that are coming up that she mentioned earlier in the show. Let's see what else. We've already got one meeting that's in the works to be that'll be happening with a client that I see here in the chat. And please be sure, excuse me, that if you would like to reach out to Lori or if you would like to work with her on a spreadsheet that you're reaching out, you can send me an email. It's lsimpson@lbcc.edu. Again, just scroll up, you'll see it in the chat. And then for those of you who would like to look at past shows, we've got those in the chat as well. So I will, for your convenience, add that one more time. Especially if you join late, you won't be able to see those earlier messages. So I just included the, there you go. I just included the YouTube link and here's my email address. Please be sure to reach out. With that, we will see you next week. That is 10 a.m. on Wednesday for another session of Small Biz Talk, Solutions for Your Small Business. Thank you. Bye-bye.